Hello, welcome. Thank you for coming. I hope you enjoyed your lunch today and hope French touch treatment is going well for you. My name is Evan Ponter, and this session is Fantastic Frameworks for Fast Future-Filled Flows in France. Had to get one more F in there. So today we're talking all about flows, and specifically I want to touch on record-triggered flows. These are the flows that happen whenever a record is created or updated, and it's Salesforce's future investment plans of where all of your declarative automation should happen. So I spent a lot of time working with various clients to migrate their declarative automation over to flows, and record-triggered flows is the place where you would set that up. And I've learned a lot of tips and tricks along the way, and I'm a big person on having frameworks and some sense of sanity as you're going to solve problems, so I don't have to keep reconsidering all the impacts. So I've put together 4 examples here, and each one shows a specific type of problem that you would be solving and how I would solve it using flows, and then I do a quick demo on how that works. For each of these examples, you can apply other problems and use this same framework to solve the same type of problem. So these are all just quick examples. And the way I'm going to go through this is I'm going to step through a couple of business requirements and show you the use case and then how we solved it and sort of the framework that's being applied here. We're going to start with before-save flows. These are flows that run in before-save context. You have that optimized for fast field updates option. Our first example is a naming convention. So this fictitious sales company wants to have all of their opportunity records have consistent names. They should all include the account name, the close date, and the amount. And anytime any one of those pieces of information changes, they want the record to automatically be updated to reflect the latest values. So the way we would do that in a flow, here is my opportunity before save flow. I'm going to step through the start element briefly. We're running this automation on the opportunity object. This is going to trigger anytime a record is created or updated. And then down at the bottom here, I've selected to optimize the flow for fast field updates. I want to touch on this for a second. Why are there 2 flavors here, the before and after? Before save context should be handling all of your automation that's updating the record that triggered the flow. So if you need something to happen on that same record, you want to use your fast field updates. Any other type of automation you might be doing, you'll use the actions and related records. A lot of people wonder what's even the benefit of using this if actions and related records can do everything else. If you do your same record updates in a before save flow, you end up using the order of execution to your benefit. So a record's being created or updated anyways. All you're doing in a before save flow is assigning values to that triggering record during the existing DML operation. The benefit here is you're not introducing any additional DML. So you don't have that extra save that would normally happen with a workflow rule or a process builder or any other after save context automation. That's the huge benefit that we're using here, and we're going to use that for this example because we want to update the name of our opportunity record in certain situations. Now if I scroll back up to entry conditions, this is the first tip to keep in mind anytime you're working with these record-triggered flows. The fewer times your flow has to run, the faster your org is going to appear for people who are clicking save all day long on all their records. Especially if you're doing bulk data updates and data loader, making sure that your automation only runs when absolutely necessary is the first strategy to make sure your org stays fast. The way we can do that is with these entry conditions. So I'm checking for any one of these 4 situations to be true. I want this flow to run. Remember, I have it set up for record is created or updated. So I need to check and see if the record is brand new. And the way I figured out how to do that in a before save flow is to check and see if the ID field has value. If that ID field is null in before save context, we know we're looking at a brand new record. So that's a way to still include criteria here and make sure your flow still runs for brand new records.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
When you're doing the use change, how does that work in the context of a brand new record? Does it regard it as a change, or does it not
It does not.
So so you combine it with the ID?
Yep. So this first criteria, since I'm using OR logic here, only one of these has to be true. So this flow is going to run for a brand new record because the ID field is null at that point. For any of the update scenarios, record is created or updated, it's going to check these other three and use that isChanged operator, which will result to a value here. So if the account is changed, the amount is changed, or the close date is changed, I want this flow to run and apply my naming convention. Now the only other element I have on the flow screen here is an element that will assign values to the triggering record. You used to be able to only have the assignment element here, and that's what's actually happening. Salesforce introduced the quote-unquote update records element in before save flows. This translates to an assignment. You're not actually introducing extra DML here. What I think is important is for people who are not as familiar with Apex or they're newer to programming, it makes more sense that using this update records is telling you you're committing these changes to the database. I think that becomes very clear for people. They've locked down the options here. So the only thing you can do in an update records element in before save context is assign values to the triggering record. So I like to use that to make it super obvious for people who come in after me that yes, these changes are committed to the database. I don't apply any extra filter conditions here because I've already set my entry conditions on the flow. All I want to do is set the value of the name field. And to do that, I use a formula resource. This is pro tip number 2. I am a heavy user of formula resources in all of my flows. So this name value formula is just using some simple if statements and does some checking and formats the values the way we want them to for a naming convention. Pro tip number 3. If you're about to traverse a relationship field, you should make sure it has a value first. Flow will throw an error at runtime if you try to traverse a blank relationship, so a lookup field or a map, or usually it's a lookup field. So here I have an if statement to make sure an account is specified. If so, I traverse that relationship and grab the name. You can apply an else condition here if you wanted to put unknown account or any other static text, or do something else entirely. Make sure you're working with correct data types, so I have to convert my date field to text in order to put it in a text field here. And then the rest of this is just showing you have all of the functions and operators you are used to from building formulas in Salesforce available to you in the Flow engine. I used to have to really emphasize that before they brought this nifty little formula insert functions here. But the rest of this is formatting the amount field to look like American US dollars. Those values are stored in the database as plain numbers. They don't necessarily have 2 decimal places. There is no currency symbol at the front. So if you wanted to have that display like US currency, you have to format that value, add in those commas, add in the decimal place, and that symbol at the beginning. Now let's activate this and I'll show you how it works. So I'm going to flip over here to my org and I'm going to create a brand new opportunity for this Burlington Textiles account. As soon as I put in an amount and a close date here and choose a stage, as soon as I click save, my flow is going to run and then it's going to commit the record to the database. And what's powerful there is even my toast message already has my automation applied to it. So it renamed the record for me according to that naming convention and put in the name, the close date, and the amount. And anytime I change one of these fields, my flow is also going to run. Here I've updated the amount field to 800, and as soon as I click save, it has updated that value for me. So it's a really great way to take any standard field or field that's not a formula field and have it behave like a formula. So you can apply this for all kinds of solutions that involve doing something like that. It works great for pick list fields that you want to automate the values. So you get that nice filter selection when you're working with reports. There's lots of use cases for stuff like this. The next scenario I want to walk through, we're going to get a little more complicated. So in this example, we're going to do a conditional update to the triggering record. We also are going to grab some information from the database using a query. So a lot of fields are available to you from that triggering record by traversing that $ record global variable like I did in the first example. I can navigate through relationship fields to get account name. But if you need other data from the system, you'll have to use a query to do that. And queries, the get records element, is available to you in before save context. So the example here, this sales team, they want to consolidate a lot of their shipments into fewer records for their operations team. So they have a requirement that anytime a brand new opportunity is created, they want to check and see if there's any other open opportunities on that account. If so, go find the very next open opportunity, and we want to put a link to that record on the new record that we are creating. So here's some static text they want to put in the next step field, check if these products can be delivered, and then give the salesperson a link to that record. So we're doing a search, we're grabbing some information, we're updating our triggering record. And we're going to showcase how we're going to do that here in our flow. This flow is still my opportunity before save flow. I'm actually going to handle both requirements in this same flow, and I'll tell you why once we get through this. So in my start element, I haven't changed anything. This is still running on the opportunity object when a record's created or updated, and it runs when a record is brand new or any of these things change from the naming convention. This new requirement just needs to happen when an opportunity is created. My first criteria here is already looking for that, so I don't need to make any additional changes. Still fast field updates here. First thing I do is I perform all my queries before I do the assignments to the triggering record, but you also want to protect your queries with a decision. This is another step to make sure that you only run a query when you absolutely need to. So here in this decision, this does the routing logic inside the flow here. I'm going to say, do I need to go find an open opportunity? I have this formula resource that says need to check for open opportunity here. I like to use resources in flows because you can reference them multiple times. So if you have a bit of logic that you need to reference in multiple places, store it in a formula resource, and then you can access it everywhere. It helps maintain it so you can make changes in one place. My need to check for open opportunity is a Boolean formula resource. So I'll show you what the logic is there. It's saying, is this a brand new record? Yes, you can use the isNew operator once you get into your flow. And I would recommend doing so because you will have inconsistent results, especially in after save flows, so definitely take advantage of that. And then the other thing I'm looking for here is I make sure I have an account ID. This helps make sure my get records element doesn't run into errors or return inconsistent results. So you can use these things to make sure you have all the information you need before you perform that query. So if it's a brand new record and I have an account, I'm going to go down the left side of this path to the get records element here. And this is going to go fetch an open opportunity. So it's finding an opportunity record that is related to the account. Again, traversing that $ record global variable. I want to make sure it's open, so I set is closed equal to false in my criteria here. I'm going to sort those records ascending by close date, so I'm finding the very next open opportunity on the account. And I only need the first record. Now here's another trick I like to use. When I only need a couple pieces of information from the results of a get records element, instead of storing it automatically in a record variable and then having to check, did I find results before I go into that record variable, I end up storing the information I need in plain text variables. And the reason for that is later on in my flow, I don't need to do as many checks to make sure I can safely reference like the value from a record variable. I can always reference a plain text variable anywhere in my flow. It might have a value or it might not. You won't run into any errors if you do it this way, and it eliminates some decision elements from your flow. And again, the fewer things we have on our canvas, the faster our flow is going to run. So all I need here is the ID from that record, so I store it in a text variable called open opportunity ID. And at this point, I have everything I need to assign values to the triggering record. So I end up doing that in a single assignment element or update records element here. I'm setting each of the fields I want to automate equal to formula resources. The first one hasn't changed at all, so that's still that name value formula from before. The second one is where we're going to do our conditional update. So this next step value will automate the field only if we need to. And what I'm doing here is using a very simple if statement. This is sort of the backbone of this framework, is you can choose to update a field within the same assignment element by using an if statement to say, do I want to automate the value? If so, here's the automated value. Otherwise, I want to leave that value alone. And the way you do that is you assign it to the value that it already has, which results in no change being made. Once this light bulb went off for me, it allowed me to really condense a lot of my before save flows and really optimize for performance in bulk data load situations. Those elements all get evaluated in bulk, so the fewer elements you have, the faster your flow runs, and the ability to consolidate all of your assignments into one for before save flows vastly improves performance. I do a whole other session where I performance tested that and did a couple different versions of flows, and this was like half the time if you set up your flows this way. So what ends up happening here is, in this if statement, I'm just checking that same formula resource from before. Did I need to go find an open opportunity? And did I find an ID in the results? I can safely reference that text variable. If both of those things are true, I put the static text, and then I'm putting a link to the record. One thing I want to highlight there is I have a lot of stuff happening here for this hyperlink. There's this $API global variable, and what it does is it gives you access to the URL for the instance that you are currently logged into. What I found is these are a really handy way to generate a dynamic URL. It works great in flows, it works great in email templates as well. There's a version for every API version that comes out, so like Winter 23's API version 56. So you'll see Enterprise Server URL 560 in here. They all have been the same in my experience. All I'm doing is finding the first part of that URL up to and including the .com/, and then I put the record ID tacked on at the end.
Can I ask you a question? Are you perhaps setting yourself up for a risk that they will retire those API versions and then those URL numbers will no longer work because they are now retiring old API versions? It's always been a frustration point for me with Salesforce. So
right. When I set these up, I use the newest one available. If they do end up retiring, then you might have to update that to a newer one.
They will.
They will retire them?
Yes.
Yeah.
They are slowly retiring the older versions, and then it will be on a regular cadence. So people use, I can't remember, custom settings or custom something, because it's a pain point with Salesforce. I haven't seen anyone. One wonders why they do it like that. Because,
I don't know.
But anyway.
Yeah, this has been a great way to dynamically generate that URL for the record. That way, as I'm deploying from environment to environment, I don't need to worry about where I'm at. I can use this in multiple orgs, and there's no problems there as I'm navigating through. So the end result here is your flow looks like this. It can handle any situation where you already have all the data you need, and you just need to apply some updates using formula resources. And it also factors in any data you query for. And as your requirements grow, you can continue to add field assignments to this single assignment element and handle all those situations and not add a ton of extra processing time to your flows. So I'll activate this and do a quick test of how this one works, solving for both requirements. So I'm going to set up another brand new opportunity on this account. This will be $700, and I'll set a stage and a close date. And my naming convention is still going to work, and because there are other open opportunities on this account, it will also set this next step field. So I'll hit save. There's my naming convention, still applies like before, and then the next step field. Found that record and put that dynamic URL to that record right here in the next step field. So those are the before save flow situations. For after save flows that are optimized for actions and related records, I have two examples there. This one's about creating multiple records. So in the example here, a sales manager comes in and wants to set the customer priority field to high on certain accounts and have two tasks created automatically for that account owner. They should review the account today and call the client tomorrow. So in a record triggered flow, this is running on the account object. It's running after save. So it's only when a record is updated. And I only want to run this when customer priority is set to high and it's updated to meet those conditions. This locks down the situations where this flow even needs to run in the first place. This is optimized for actions and related records. And what I'm doing in this first assignment element is doing all the assignments that I need to do. There's a couple things happening here. The first thing I'm going to do is assign values to the first task I want to create. So I created a task record variable, and then I'm just assigning values to that task record variable. Again, using formulas if I need to. I have access to $record to grab any values from the triggering record, and assigning all those values. In the same assignment element, you can also assign all the values for the second task. So you don't have to do these in separate assignment elements. In fact, I would encourage you to streamline your canvas and just have a single assignment here. Taking that a step further, once we've added or assigned all the values to each task, we can now add those tasks to a collection variable. I read in the documentation, and it wasn't always this way, but these assignment elements do execute in the order you've defined. So Salesforce has now guaranteed that all those tasks will get assigned their values. Then in the same assignment element, you can add them to a collection and they'll have all those values. So here's my task to create record collection. I add task 1 and I add task 2 right behind it. And then in my create tasks, create records element, I'm going to create these records using a record collection. This just helps cut down on the number of DML statements that are happening in your flow. Instead of creating one task in the create element records and then doing a second one right behind it, this helps streamline that process and just commit all of your records to the database at the same time. So let me activate this and show you how that works. Back on my account, I will set the priority field from low to high. If you watch over here in the task section, as soon as I click save, that flow runs and it sets those two tasks, one with today's date on it, the second one with tomorrow's date. The subject here is cut off, but it says call client, and this one says review the account. The last example I have here is about updating multiple records. The example is the sales team was tired of when an account goes inactive, they would have to go manually mark all the open opportunities as closed lost. So they wanted some automation that anytime they set that active field to no, go find all the open opportunities and mark them as closed lost. What I wanted to highlight here is the different ways you can set up an update records element. I am setting this up in a separate after save flow running on the account object. I have found that the fewer elements that are executing, the faster your flow runs. So if you have mutually exclusive requirements, setting it up separate will gain you some performance enhancements. So this is going to run on an account when a record is updated, but only when active is set to no and when the record's updated to meet those conditions. This is still running for actions and related records. In this update records element, you now have 4 options here. First option is what we looked at in before save context, and that's really the only time you should use that first option. You don't want to be updating the record that triggered your flow in after save context, because that defeats the whole purpose of the benefits you get from before save flows. Updating records related to the account record will do the same thing that I'm about to show you here. They are equivalent. I did test that earlier and saw that there's the same amount of queries being run, the same amount of DML statements happening. This third option will use all the records from a collection. This fourth option is running a query, collecting all the results, assigning values to them, and then committing all those changes back to the database. So it's doing a lot of work for you. I just want to highlight that sometimes people don't understand that it is going to run that query every single time. So I've seen people use this fourth option and then their criteria down here is saying, oh, the ID equals this. They already have the ID that they need. You don't actually need to run a query in that situation. So you could save a little bit of time in processing by using this third option if you already have the IDs for the records you're hoping to update. Now the benefit here is for this fourth option or the second one, they both do the same thing. You can find all the records related to the account that are open, so is closed equals false, and then set a single value for all of those records at the same time. So as long as you're setting the same value on all the records, you can use a formula here, you can make all kinds of decisions, and all those results are going to get that new value. So I'll activate this, do a quick test, and then we will wrap this up. So here on that account, I have a bunch of open opportunities. I'm going to set active to no, and that flow is going to go through and mark all of those open opportunities as closed lost. So a couple quick examples on how we have been able to use these record triggered flows to solve for a lot of scenarios. I have a QR code for a link to this. So here's everything we talked about before save flows. Use entry conditions, protect your queries with decisions, query for records and store them in plain text variables so you don't run into issues later. And then I like to use a single assignment element and formula resources to conditionally set values. After save flows, here's the two that we looked at. Again, use entry conditions, consolidate your assignments, understand the different options when you're working with the update records element, and use that query and update whenever possible. And then over here again, consolidating our database operations by using collection records. Thank you so much. We might have a few minutes for some questions, and here is a link to get to those slides and all of my contact information. Thank you. Any questions?
Especially the last example where you did something to related records. What are the limits there? You know, like how many related opportunities can I update in such a flow?
The benefit of working with flows is Salesforce will batch update records for you in batches of 200 if you were to do that. You're still going to run into the same governor limits you would see in Apex as far as CPU timing and the total number of records that you can update.
But the rest is like batch. I could update like 3 million.
I wouldn't do 3 million. I think it's still 50,000 because there's a query limit.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, you should be able to do 50,000 as long as you don't run into the CPU limit.
Okay.
Yeah. But Salesforce handles a lot of that for you behind the scenes when this flow runs and gets batch executed.
But if you would run into limit, you still would have to restore code.
Yes, or you could use some Apex invocable actions has also been a workaround if you want to stay in the flow world.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.